Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's talk Spider-Man. Actually, I've got a mail of Spider-Man, but you know what? I've been reading the Amazing Spider-Man, new Zeb Wells book, and we have a new Dan Slott book coming out with Bagley, and Spider-Man shows up in a bunch of different places. But on that Zeb Wells book, I'm having this weird effect where the comic feels kind of simultaneously like it's moving at slow glacier speed, and also skipping around too fast. It's got a very strange tone to it. I'm not sure what to make of you get past all the other stuff, the Mary Jane relationship, Norman Osborn, John Romita Jr., pencils looking rushed, kind of all that kind of stuff. But the tone of the book, it seems to fly over stuff that you'd want more time with, and then it seems to slow down with you get like the Tombstone dynamic, and that's our opening arc, and like some of those beats just drug on and on. And the even the stuff with the Vulture, there was like some really quick bits, and then there was like the Norman Osborn stuff that just seemed to play out for pages. It's got a very odd tone to it that I can't quite wrap my head around. But I'm curious. I have nothing. Zeb Wells not my most favorite writer. Also, definitely not a terrible writer. I've deeply enjoyed some things that Wells have done, so I can say that pretty definitively. I think that he's thoughtful. The Hellions book that he did, the more recent one. Again, it wasn't my favorite book, but it was thoughtful, and I hand him a lot. And the tone felt pretty snappy there. But Spider-Man seems like they're working the kinks out, or I don't know. Something seems amiss there. But anyway, let's get to this mail also about Spider-Man. It says something has been bothering me. Well, hey, what's up, Perch? Got to do the greeting. Something has been bothering me for years about my favorite character, Spider-Man. Is Spidey too powerful for animation or movies? Has anyone thought that? When I first read Amazing Spider-Man back in the mid-'80s, I was amazed at how different the comic and the Spider-Man His Amazing Friends show was. In the comics, Spidey was funny, bold, and used his fists a lot to fight enemies. Even after Batman the Animated Series, you would finally think that Marvel would use what Batman the Animated Series had and make Spidey a feared, funny, and badass character, in animation at least. Finally, in the movies, he used his superhuman strength to knock out Flash in Far From Home. Sorry, Perch, but I'm one of those Spidey fans that did collect the comics and knows the character. I still dig the Spidey movies and will watch Freshman this year. Freshman year. Watch Freshman year? Oh, right. What do you say, Perch? I'm trying to. So I didn't quite get the exact question out there, but if I'm gathering your mail correctly, there's a tonal difference between what they do in the movies and the cartoons and what they do in the comics. Now, in fairness, I think the comics themselves have shifted around a lot. So depending on what era of Spider-Man you're talking about, I think you're going to get a different tone of Spider-Man. We've seen more jokey Spider-Man. We've seen all kinds of different renditions of Spider-Man, the character. There's a major difference between Spider-Man kind of driven to the brink in Kraven's Last Hunt versus Spider-Man, in the current, Amazing Spider-Man arc with Wells. But one thing that is true is I think we got to. I'll take your question and kind of take it in little bits. For sure, I think that the fighting style of Spider-Man is very different in the comics than in the cartoon and the movie. And in the comics, it is a lot more physical. Even with the jokes and everything else, Spider-Man will punch, kick. He's a brawler. He'll certainly use his webs, but if you really look at the comic closely, there's various scenes, and he's not doing it. It's kind of just how comics are drawn and everything else, where Spider-Man is hanging people and kicking them around. Spider-Man is murdering people on a constant basis in comics. If you took those things and you just translate them to real life, Spider-Man is snapping necks. Not just Gwen's, but others. He is breaking arms. He's wrapping people up in webs and throwing them off a building. Spider-Man is there's a scene even in the recent run where he's fighting the Vulture, and there's several moments where Spider-Man kills the Vulture. There's no surviving what some of what was going on there. Also, conversely, Vulture would have killed Spider-Man multiple times. But anyway, somehow Spider-Man, by the way, in the comics, it's like they've given him a healing factor. They will do things where they just beat the living shit out of him. It's like a rib is sticking out, and they're like, "Oh man, this Spider-Man's really, really beat. He needs to go lay down in his apartment for a while. It's like, no, if this injury happened in real life, you'd be in the ICU and on life support. Like Spider-Man's like, I got to go sleep it off in my apartment for a couple days. Like, what are you talking about? Your arm's broken. Your ribs are all caved in. They like do scenes where it's like Spider-Man is like, oh my God, my lungs are filling with blood and my leg is snapped. I can't move my face. And they, they do this. And then like the next shot is like Spider-Man collapsing in his bed in his apartment. Like, oh man, I need a nap. And you're like, what? How are you not? You're dead, man. Anyway, that's it. Just cracks me up. In the cartoons, I think it's safe to say that they don't want to show that kind of hyperviolence, for something that's arguable for kids. So Spider-Man gets to be more jokey. He swings. His netting people up is just a little bit more just passive. And they're not going to show Spider-Man just wailing and beating the crap out of somebody. So that's I think what goes on there. In the movies, I think it's hard to portray that again without it coming across as super violent. And so I think it's like, put it this way: we're trying to make a PG Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield or new guy. I'm just gonna throw shade. Drive Joe crazy. Anyway, but if you take a comic, like go back and look at, I don't know, some of the big Sinister Six fights, some of the, like you can go way back, you can go into Dan Slott's run, you can go wherever you want. You can go to Nick Spencer's run. Pardon me. I'm boring myself just talking. Kindred, look at that fight that Nick Spencer did there with some of the Sin Eater and all this kind of stuff. Now, look at the comic and just imagine this being on the big screen. And really look at when Spider-Man is brawling and fighting. Hell, even look at this current arc where you've got Spider-Man fighting, Tombstone's men. And just watch and think about, the movement and the action if this was, a cartoon or if this was a film. Spider-Man would be it would look super violent. It would look like John Wick level of violence. Now so then becomes the argument, why don't they do that? That would be awesome. Well, I mean, because Spider-Man at the end of the day is a very valuable license for Disney and, Sony paying into it and everything else. They do not want to have Spider-Man get portrayed as John Wick. The last thing they want to do is do an R-rated Spider-Man movie. If you portrayed the violence as Spider-Man does, and again, in the comics, it's there's still frames and he's swinging around. It's designed to be more stylistic. And the next frame, everybody just gets up and you can just kind of erase blood. And, it's simple. And they're able to kind of use word balloons to joke around and lighten it up a little bit. That's they get away with a lot more violence because you don't really realize it. Suddenly, if it's in a cartoon and you're watching all this movement, it looks horrifying. Now, just for the record, I'd love to see this someday. That'd be awesome. I would love to see brutal, violent Spider-Man being, and it's not even not being himself, being, portrayed as he is in the comics. It could be a big kind of, eye opener. But it would hurt the license. Disney would not love it. Sony would not like it. Suddenly they're getting an R rating slapped onto their Spider-Man movie, and that wouldn't be good. And so, that's the dynamic that's happening right there. Anyway, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It would be fun to see. Somebody did, like, you can go on YouTube as an example and check out screen recordings of Spider-Man, the video game, the PlayStation one, and people just, show some of the violence, and they do is Spider-Man killing these people? And it's kind of hilarious, but it will sum up what I'm talking about, because you see Spider-Man just slamming people up against a brick wall and turning them into paste, and I mean, like it shows the kind of scenes that go on in the comics in this game unfiltered, and it tells you exactly why they don't do that in comics and movies. Anyway, thank you very much for the question. Hope you enjoyed the answer, and let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.